Hello everybody, welcome to this webinar today. We are with Nottingham City Council, Dash Services and Unipol Student Homes, and we thought we'd put together this webinar for you today on the latest on the new licensing scheme from two new licensing schemes from Nottingham City Council. So, as I said, we're joined today by David Hobbs, who's the Selective Licensing Manager at Nottingham City Council, Julia Liversidge, who is the Operations Manager, and Matt Allison from Unipol Student Homes, who's the Codes Administrator. And for those of you who don't know, I'm Linda Cobb from Dash Services, and I will be comparing this webinar for you today. We've got over 250 landlords joining us on this webinar. So we know it's a topic that everybody is interested in getting more information on. This session won't be about the wheres and wherefores of licensing and the legalities of it or the morality of it. This session is being put together to look at the application process, what happens once an application has been submitted, how that all rolls out, and timescales, fees, accreditation, and all of those practicalities to help us. So it's quite a practical session. So if you've got a notepad and pen, make some notes so you can take them away, any sort of top tips that you need to be following when you do start making your applications. Just some housekeeping then. This session is being recorded, so hopefully Zoom told you that when you entered. So we are then able to make it available for anybody that couldn't attend. We've had so many people join us, but there are so many more landlords that we'd like to reach. In addition to that, we know that MPO and the NRLA, the landlord associations in the area, are also doing sessions. So if you can't make this or you want some extra information, then please do contact those organisations as well. In terms of how we're going to answer the question and answer session, if you will see the Q&A button on Zoom. If you pop your questions in there, remember it's about the application process and some tips there. So if you pop your questions in there, then at the end of the session, quite a few landlords have submitted some questions, so I'll pull them all together and then we can ask the experts, the team, to give us some steer on them. So, without further ado, I think it's you first, isn't it? Is it you first, Julie, on additional licensing?
I'll just share your presentation then.
Yeah, thanks, Matt.
Morning, everybody. I hope you can all hear me okay. I'm here to talk about the new additional licensing scheme that was approved by the council in September 2023. It's a further 5-year scheme of additional licensing. Matt, could you move to the next slide, please? Yeah, so it's a further 5-year of additional licensing. It's the third scheme that the city has had in place. It'll run from the 1st of January 2024 to the 31st of December 2028, unless it's withdrawn before those dates. It's very similar to the existing scheme. We're not changing any of the requirements. The only big change is that the designation area has widened and we are going right up to the city boundary. So if you look at the map that's attached, it is basically the whole map of Nottingham City. We've done this because we have evidence to demonstrate that there's a likelihood that HMOs that we haven't had within the licensing scheme before are likely to have problems that need addressing. And that was all in the evidence that we put forward for the consultation and also for approval for the council board. And those papers are available on the Nottingham City website if you want to go and have a look at those in detail. On feedback from landlords, we've reviewed the licence application form, like our selective colleagues have done as well, and the HMO revised form will be available from the 1st of November. If you want to make your applications from November into the new additional scheme, we will accept those, and we will process them accordingly, as you know, in order as they come in. Next screen, please. The aims of licensing obviously is to protect the health, safety and welfare of the occupiers. We focus on high risk HMOs and we identify and target these for improvement. We've got a range of measures that we put in place for this. So we look at complaints that we may receive, how the license holder cooperates with our interventions. We've got a license holders audit that you may have been involved in. We also have done some external work where we've looked at the visual impact of the HMOs on the community, and all of that is considered, and then we target some internal inspections from that data on a risk basis. And that doesn't mean that if you're DASH accredited you won't be inspected, because we do have to do an assurance and accredited assurance dip test to make sure our accredited partners are delivering the standards that we are expecting. So licensing is aimed to protect the most vulnerable tenants. These can be tenants that are scared of reporting things that are wrong with a property because they may get evicted if they raise their voice. I know many license holders would never do that, but there are some out there that would. So we try to tackle that end of the market with licensing as well. It's to improve living conditions, quality of HMOs, improved shared amenity standard. I think everybody's probably familiar with our amenity standards because we've had 10 years of additional licensing now. We are going to update the amenity standards booklet and try and put a bit more information in there for license holders, so we will share that when we've done it. It's to promote better management of HMOs, reduce antisocial behaviour, which is a key driver, help integrate HMOs into neighbourhoods. That's really important because we get a lot of community feedback about HMOs and how they impact the lives of the residents. A better neighbourhood and residents working together, but basically to resolve local issues. That work has progressed in the last 5 years and it has been going really well. We've had some really positive feedback on that. So HMO licensing process, obviously you need to make your application. For the new scheme, hopefully applications will start coming in as as early as the 1st of November. But as soon as your property becomes occupied as a HMO, you need to have a license application in place to cover yourself for things like rent repayment orders, but also it's an offence not to have a license if you need one. So please do be aware of that. It's to ensure managers and associated persons are fit and proper. So there's a series of tests that we go through where we look at the history and the declaration that is made by the license holders, proposed license holders and managers. Each HMO must be suitable for the number of occupiers that is proposed. If it isn't, we can pop on extra conditions on the license to make it suitable for that number of occupants. The standards of amenities and room sizes are obviously is prescribed. The standard of management in HMOs must be acceptable. So we look at the management arrangements. Is there enough financial provision there? If there's a manager in place, if the license holder's away, can they do repairs, that type of stuff. And managers must have a sufficient level of competency. And also there are some other legal tests that we have to satisfy in regards to it being a HMO. Next slide, please. So we are looking at our fees here, and we have had some fee increases, and I can't quite see it on my screen, so I'm just going to look for those in a different document, if you bear with me a second. So the licence fees have increased. You may be aware of this. They went up on the 1st of October. It's the first increase that we've had for the HMO licence fees since 2018. We've tried to keep our accredited fee as reasonable as possible, with consideration of what work accreditation helps us reduce. So we don't have to inspect as many accredited properties. We tend to get less complaint work, and they generally need less intervention because of accreditation. So that's why we're able to offer a competitive fee. The fee for the accreditation is 1,123. We've really tried to keep that as low as we can. It's still about £350 difference between the fees. So we think that is, you know, a pretty good reward for landlords that are seeking accreditation, and I hope you agree with us. So the standard fee that's been introduced is £1,703. £73. The fees are paid in a Part A. So Part A is paid with your application, and then Part B is collected once we've determined the application and the licence is going to be granted. If we determine that we're not going to grant a licence, then the Part B fee isn't applicable, and you don't need to pay that. But we will go through all of that if that occurs. It's very rare that we refuse licenses, I would say that. The less compliant fee has been taken forward again. Again, hopefully nobody on this call will be fall into the category to pay the less compliant fee. However, it is there, and it is significantly higher than the other fees. That's to allow us to do extra monitoring of these properties where we have these concerns, and it's worked really well. And from some of the work we did over the last 5 years, we've 95% of these were the worst properties that we visited and really needed that extra intervention. So the less compliant fee is 1,981. If the less compliant fee becomes applicable to any properties, it's charged, the bulk of it is charged with the Part B payment. So you will be made aware of that. Okay, next slide, please. So the regular defects that we come across, it's important that landlords are aware of these. So when you're doing your regular inspections, or you're moving in, moving out times, you can look for these things. So defective fire alarm systems is one of the ones that we find quite regularly. Either the tenants have tampered with them or covered them up. Shower caps, that type of thing is quite common. We're in the electrical era, so everybody's got 100 things that they want to charge. So overloaded electrical cables and trailing electrical cables is very common. I think Dash have done some awareness about the charging of e-bikes, the electric bikes as well. So worth noting those. Defective fire doors. So if we do have a fire in a property, it's really important that the fire doors are operating correctly. They're self-closing. There isn't big gaps around them. And we will pick that up at inspection and ask you to do works if needed. Obstructed escape routes, talked about the scooters and chargeable bikes. They are quite commonly in escape routes because it's an easy place to keep them. in the property, but they do obstruct your escape routes, so please be aware of that. Damp and mould, very topical at the moment, so it's really important that you're checking your property for damp and mould, looking for, you know, the obvious things that could cause damp and mould. Vegetation and guttering is one of the ones that we see quite often, that, you know, can cause you really bad damp problems in your property. Dirty communal areas, bathrooms and kitchens, you need an agreement there. You're either sending a cleaner in or there's some agreement where they're doing that themselves. But this is something that we will report back to the licence holders. Falls hazards, no handrails. Handrails have been removed or damaged. Loose carpet on stairs. We've had a few spiral staircases recently where they are quite dangerous. They've got no risers in the back of the treads and stuff like that. So if you're thinking about anything like that, you're doing some refurbishments, have a word with us first before you go ahead and implement these things, because we may not be in support of those because they cause extra hazards. Untidy external areas, again, we've done a lot of work with our external work. We've had some really positive feedback from that on the first round of interventions where we asked people to upgrade the properties. We then had to target 350 licence holders that hadn't completed the works. And out of those, we're taking, I think, at the last count, it was 15 civil penalty notices forward where works haven't been done. So, you know, do be aware that there is consequences. We ask you, we warn you, and then we do take enforcement action where we need to. Bins has been a big issue, but we have seen improvements in this. So thank you for your work towards that. We're getting a lot less complaints about bins and waste. They haven't gone away. They will always pop up, but it seems the interventions that we've put in through licensing seem to be having a positive effect. So that's really good. We do see non-compliance with extra license conditions, so please make sure you read your license thoroughly, because there is can be extra conditions on there. We usually agree the extra conditions, but it's really important that you've read the conditions and understand what you're responsible for. Again, it's an offence not to comply with your conditions, so please be, you know, bear that in mind. There is a requirement to display your licence, and we've also got a condition about supplying a tenancy information pack. There's a condition where you're asked to give the tenants a copy of the licence and the licence conditions so that for their awareness. Next slide, please, Matt. I've just put some photographs in here about the work that we've done, some of the things that we've found as we've been going over. They're not very exciting, I'm sorry, but these were the best ones that I could find, for example. So property we visited, it had French doors and a wooden window frame. They were rotten. And the licence holder, we advised them about it, and they fitted a new patio door and window, improving the thermal insulation of the property and, you know, making the property really nice to live in now. So thank you, landlord, for doing that. Next one. This is one where we had a very small kitchen, and they'd sort of just shoved all the cooker and fridge and everything in. So we asked them to rearrange the cooking area. Our tenant is a little bit untidy on this one, but they do have work surfaces both sides of their cooker now, so they can operate that safely. Next photo, please. This is a shared house. This was all males that were sharing this house. I can't tell you what that smell was like in that toilet area, but it wasn't pleasant. So we asked the tenant, the landlord, to do some improvement works, and they've put some nice new lino down, and they've sort of sealed all the wooden areas, so it won't, it's readily cleansable, and it won't attract that smell that builds up with it. Next one, please. Again, another bathroom area. Cracked tiles, obviously they're quite sharp, can injure people. Doesn't look very nice, not attractive. So the license holder did some work and he's put a nice new unit, modern unit in there, and mirror and new tiles. So that looked very nice as well. Next one. This was unprotected fall between levels. So our license holder did some work to guard the area. We did have a picket style fence to start off with just railings across, but we asked them to do some further work to prevent children from climbing on it easily, which they did. So that's really positive. Next one. Yep, I think this is probably the last photograph we've got. This is some of the work we did where a large wall had fallen over and was in quite a dangerous condition in the back garden. We made the license holder aware, and they've rebuilt the wall and it's all nice, safe and secure now. So really positive work. All of these examples I've given you are where we've approached the license holder and asked them to do work, and they've complied with the work. We haven't needed to enforce, we haven't needed to serve notice or anything like that. The license holders have agreed with us that the work needs doing, and they've done the work. And that's the way we like licensing to operate. So thank you. That's my presentation today. If you've got any questions about additional licensing, the new scheme, etc., you can email hmo@nottinghamcity.gov.uk, and we'll try to answer your questions as fast as we can. David's presentation has got more about the mapping system and how you can locate your property to see if it needs a license. So I will leave that with David to present to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Julie. Yeah, I'd reiterate some of the things that you were saying, and common defects as well that we find, some of those with Dash. So it was good to see sort of the crossover there. We're going to have questions at the end, Julie, if that's okay, and then because some of them will require input from you and David. So we'll have a look at the end if that's okay. Are you okay, David?
Thank you.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, David. You're going to, and I know there were some questions in the Q&A box saying, is David going to speak? Yep. I wouldn't let him miss out. So yes, David, you're going to speak to us now about selective licensing as well.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Linda, and thanks, Dash and Unipol, for organising this, and for those that are attending, really big thank you for taking the time to hopefully learn something useful from what we're saying, something that will help your business, help you operate more safely. But yeah, if you could, when you're ready, Matt, that'd be great. Thank you.
No problem. Yeah, I was just asking if I was sharing yours. That's great.
Oh yeah,
right.
Yes, please.
No problem. Here we go.
Great, thank you. So I'm just going to run through a few of these things, as you can see below, around the second scheme. Some key dates, and in terms of geography, what the scheme boundaries are, because it has changed. Like Julie's, it is a new scheme. We are operating in a different time frame. We have currently got no scheme in place. The first scheme ended at the end of July, and with the government approval not landing until the end of July, we've got to give 3 months notice as a minimum. And so I'm just going to run through those dates, and then I'm going to look at the fees, a bit of what the application process is. And Julie's touched on the less compliant fee for HMOs, which they've had in place for about for 5 years now, since the second scheme, and we're introducing that as well for selective licensing this time around. So I was just going to touch on some of the criteria there. And this is a nice graphic that Julie's already alluded to with her presentation, but it just shows you visually the 3 different license schemes that operate, with the bigger properties falling under mandatory licensing on the left, and additional licensing cover of the smaller HMO properties, and then selective licensing is the singularly occupied houses and flats that operate within the boundary of the designation. So clearly the presentation will focus on selective licensing. So again, just to run through quickly some of the key dates. We did a consultation last year between May and August. Following that consultation and the presentation of the evidence, we presented that to the Council's Executive Board in January, which was approved. Because of the size of the scheme, although it's smaller than the first scheme, it was still big enough for the Council not to be able to make its own decision. We had to get confirmation from the Secretary of State. So we applied to the Secretary of State in March, and that approval was received in August. So that sort of confirmation of what we presented to councillors was confirmed by the Secretary of State in August, well, end of July, literally last couple of days in July. That meant we couldn't have a scheme that ran straight away. We've got to give 3 months notice as a minimum. So during August, September, October, we've been advertising the scheme through the methods required in the legislation, and we've also done it on social media. We put it in newsletter. We've done the landlord newsletter, which you can sign up to if you're not already signed up to it, so you can receive regular updates about the things that are happening that may affect you and your business. So the scheme doesn't start till the 1st of December. So if you've had a license already in the first scheme, you will not need to reapply until your license expires. So if you've got a license that was issued, I don't know, 3 years ago, it's likely that you won't need to reapply until that license expires, which may be a different date, the 1st of December. But if you applied early on in the scheme, you will probably have to reapply now or before the 1st of December. You can apply now. That link that I put on the slides, and they'll be available to be sent around afterwards, is through our website. That takes you directly to the application form. If you're not ready to apply, you need to gather some information. Julie's hinted at some of those things that you'll need to provide as part of the application process, but we've reviewed our application form. We've stripped it right back. We've required fewer documents to be uploaded as part of the process. So the only thing that you have to provide is a proof of address for the license holder. So that could be council tax statement, bank statement, driving license, anything that's got the address that's on the application form for the license holder. That's the only document that you have to upload. The other document that you may need to upload is the license holder declaration, which is where the applicant is different to the license holder. So often a managing agent might be filling in the form if you're not operating in Nottingham, or you've got an agent looking after your property. They may be filling the application form as part of that process. You as the proposed license holder need to fill in that form and complete a few declarations as part of that process. It's no different to what we've required in the first scheme. It's the same information. It's just a fairly simple form to fill in that just needs to get uploaded with the application form. They're the only two documents that you're required to upload. So the application process, I think the quickest we've had so far is 12 minutes. And that's probably a fairly straightforward application. But a lot of the information we've tried to condense. We've removed questions that we asked in the previous form that are not required as part of the legislative, what's required in the Housing Act. So we've really tried to make it simpler, more straightforward for you as applicants filling in the process. So what you can be doing now is gathering that information if you've got more than one property, information if you're not, if you're a managing agent acting on behalf of somebody, pulling that information together about all the relevant people. So anybody that's got an interest in the property, which could be the mortgage company, a leaseholder, freeholder, other owners, all the information that you need in terms of their addresses and their email contacts and that sort of thing. Gathering that all together now, all that can be done now. And information on the fit and proper status. So if there is somebody that's got any criminal records that needs to be declared as part of that process, that is going to be the proposed license holder or manager getting that ready to fill in the form. The big change that we have made is because we've slimmed down the application form, we've removed the save option on the form, and there's a few reasons for that. It caused a lot of problems in the first scheme in terms of landlords saving things and not coming back to it for weeks and weeks and weeks, and then sometimes using that link multiple times. even though it was specified for one property. So that got it caused problems with the application process, and also because the form was bigger last time, it took the loading time of the form when people were going back to it caused problems as well. So we've removed that to try and make it quicker and easier, and because it's a quick process, we believe that it should be done in one sitting, can be done in one sitting, and actually would be more beneficial for you as applicants to be able to fill it in quickly, more smoothly, and then move on to the next thing. So we'll be really interested to see whether that works for you. We've had some feedback to say that people want it reinstated, but we're going to see how it works in the short term. But we think with it being so quick now, it should be able to be done in one sitting and be able to get things done as quickly as you can. Okay, thanks, Matt. So I'm just going to very quickly, I've got a couple of maps on the next page, talk about the scheme boundary compared to scheme 1. So if you had a license in scheme 1, just very quickly, if you know Nottingham, the boundary has shrunk in most areas. Overall, it's about, I think it's about 10% smaller than the first scheme. So areas of the city that have come out of the scheme are Wilford and Clifton, which is towards the south of the city. Some parts of Woollerton have also come out, and a few areas in the north of the city, which is around the sort of Bestwood and Sherwood areas of the city, if you know Nottingham. If you don't, the next maps will help you identify those areas that have come out. But also new areas coming in include areas around Broxtowe Estate and Castle Boulevard, which are new into the areas, particularly Broxtowe Estate area. The increase as a council estate in effect, but with the right to buy, more and more landlords have bought those properties up and now rent them out. So there's been an increase in the proportion of private rented properties that weren't in that area compared to 5 years ago when the first scheme was introduced. 2 links there. I'll go through these links later, but they're really useful links for you to be able to identify whether or not your property does fall within the boundary or outside the boundary. So I'll touch on those links as well in the next few slides. Thanks, Matt. So yeah, scheme 1 on the left and scheme 2 on the right. You can see the shrinking at the bottom of the city, at the south, where Clifton has been taken out, and the north, where it's shrunk again, but a little. I don't know quite what shape it is. We sometimes think it's like a dragon, but the nose of the dragon, the face, whatever, the tongue, the fire coming out of the dragon, that area is new, and a little bit around Castle Boulevard as well. You can just see is new. So that's just very quickly a visual comparison. And then on the next slides, I'll just go through what the My Property pages look like. Again, this isn't new, but it allows you to be able to zoom in for your particular property. So the geoserver.nottinghamcity.gov.uk link allows you to look at your own property. So I put in Loxley House here, right in the city centre. It falls within the boundary. But when you are searching, just make sure that where you've got the drop-down menu, look for the housing and property layer. That's really, really important. It used to be on the front page of our My Property pages, but because there are now multiple multiple schemes, and we've got old schemes, we've got new schemes, we wanted to make sure that it was easy to find and we didn't clog up the front page. So it's been moved to the property and to the housing and property layer. So there's multiple layers on that drop-down menu. So I've highlighted that in the red at the top. Really important that you check that you're in the housing and property layer. Otherwise, you won't find the information. Okay, thank you, Matt. And then the other mapping link that we've got is Nottingham Insight Mapping, which again allows you to search on not just the selective licensing schemes, but it allows search on the mandatory, the additional schemes. It shows you old schemes, boundaries, new scheme boundaries. And this allows you to zoom in and zoom out, allows you to add in multiple properties. So you can keep adding properties, and every property you add, it creates a new dot on the layer and shows you whether or not you're inside the boundary or not. So on the next page, again, housing and property layer down the left-hand side, I've put in one property, which is Loxley House, with the bottom arrow on the right, with the yellow arrow showing it, and then I've added Byron House into that, which is one of our another where our office is based. you can just see it adds another dot, and I've just added the yellow arrow with using my technical wizardry. So that allows you just to keep layering. So if you've got 10, 15 properties, you can keep layering and see whether or not you're in or out of the boundaries. Keep adding in the address on the sort of top left, or in the search function. And it's just another way of checking the scheme boundaries as well. So coming on to the fees, we've worked really hard to keep the fee at very, very similar to what it is or was in the first scheme. And that's partly because the application process has been streamlined. So we're confident now that the application process is quicker, not just for you, but for us. And that means that we're able to keep the fees at a level that's similar to what it was. So I think that's been something we've worked really hard on, because there has been significant inflation pressures, but with our processing times being reduced, we're able to offer this competitive fee. The change here is the less compliant fee, which I'll talk about in a bit more detail as we go on. But as Julie's mentioned, we have a Part A and a Part B fee, which is exactly the same as what it was for Scheme 1. The Part A fee is less because, again, that was linked to our application processing times. And again, like Julie said, you don't pay the Part B fee if, for whatever reason, we don't issue a license and refuse a license. You only pay the Part A fee. And online payments, that's what we're working with now. Okay, and then the other thing that is not new to Nottingham, but wasn't in at the beginning of the first scheme, was our block application fees. So this might be new to some of you. This is where you have got more than one property within a block. So it might be 2 flats, 6 flats, or if you've got a large student block, 600 flats in a block. And the law allows us to issue 1 license for blocks in those situations. However, what we've done is created a block policy that provides clarity and guidance around when we would accept a block application. So, for example, and I put the link in there, and it's part of our executive board reports that are on our website as well. I put the link in here and which paragraph it is, because that document talks about the fees and all of everything else. So paragraph 12 and onwards talks about the block licensing policy. So where, in essence, there's common ownership and management of that property, allows us to issue 1 license for the block. And the more flats you have in the block, the cheaper it gets. So we issue 1 license, but the fee is based on, it's called like a base fee and a flats fee. So it's a bit complicated, but you pay once for the base fee, and then you pay per flat. So the more flats you have, it kind of layers up in terms of the fee. So if you have fewer flats, it's not as cost effective to apply for a block. But the more flats you have in a block, it becomes more cost effective, and you may want to choose a block license compared to an individual license for each of the flats if you fit the criteria. So do have a look at that. That may be something that some of you may want to choose. And these are paper application forms. These aren't going to be online. There's a bit more information required for a block application to make sure that it fits within the criteria. So we have to undertake some more checks and balances compared to an individual application to make sure it fits the criteria. And we've got the fees for standard accreditation and less compliant fee there as well. So just going to touch on the less compliant fee. Quite a lot of words here, and I put the link in at the bottom of the PowerPoint just to give you somewhere else where you can read through the detail, because this is just examples of when the less compliant fee may apply. And so I've highlighted some of the common ones, but there are more. And we've got a bullet point at the bottom that allows us to consider other cases where, on a case-by-case basis, we may consider it. But again, I'm hoping that I'm talking to people that we will never have to deal with a less compliant fee. But there will be situations where, for example, we have to chase applications where landlords don't apply. We have to chase for applications to be made. And the less compliant fee raises our concerns in terms of suitable management of the property if landlords can't apply on time. If there are significant concerns, health and safety complaints that are about disrepair, fire safety, management regulations, contraventions for HMOs, those are the types of situations where we may say, actually, we've got some concerns about this property, and this landlord will be applying the less compliant fee to this property. So that history of enforcement action being taken, poor management of the property, antisocial behaviour and non-compliance with licence conditions. These, again, raise our concern level in terms of how well these properties are being managed. So that's why there's a less compliant fee. We, like Julie has had it in for HMO licensing for a number of years already, don't think it's fair that good landlords should be paying for the extra work that poor landlords cause. So we wanted to make sure that actually there's a fee that's more appropriate to those landlords that don't want to work with the council and causes additional work. We didn't think it was fair that this cost would get divided by all landlords. It was more appropriate that it would be paid for by hopefully a smaller proportion of those landlords. And I think that's it, Matt. In terms of presentation, really a bit of a summary on how to apply, what the fees are, and how we'll be applying those fees. But open to questions. Thank you.
Lots of questions. Yes. Thank you so much, David. I've got some questions from landlords that are ahead of the time, but I've got a few in the box as well. So in the Q&A box. One, is the fee structure the same for both of you, really? Is the fee structure the same for properties held by a limited company? So if you're a limited company, or if you're just Linda Cobb, you make the same fee for that.
Yeah. Yes, it's sure. Yeah.
Okay.
That's an easy one.
That's an easy one. Yeah. Do you recognise my accreditation with the NRLA? No, so it's just Dash and Unipol and the national code at the moment. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Will the links be sent out via email? I can answer that one. Yes, I can put. We can put all the links together in the post email. That'd be fine. Hang on, can you copy and paste data in the case of multiple selective licensing applications? Would that be, or would you be better?
In terms of the application process, if you've got saved contacts as part of your previous applications, they should all be there. So if you've applied before and you've been the proposed license holder, that should just, that's all part of the account that you have with the council. So you will be able to upload those details. The property specific information is limited. We don't need a lot of property specific information compared to HMO application process, because obviously there's more considerations that the HMO team need to take into account. You can copy and paste into it, but it might be a bit dangerous if you're wanting to make sure that the information is accurate. You are responsible for making sure that the application is an accurate representation. It shouldn't. Everything is a lot quicker and should be a lot smoother. Things should load quicker because it's a smaller form. So I would try and avoid copying and pasting a lot of information. We're not asking for a lot of information. It's nearly all statutory information that we have to ask. We've taken out some of those questions that we asked previously.
Sometimes some computer programs, when you put in your name, it allows you just to pre-populate anyway, doesn't it? So that might be.
Yeah. I
don't know. Also, a question here about, do either of the applications require a DBS check?
No DBS required.
No DBS.
So just on that, Linda, for example, things that we used to ask for, ask for a PC certificate. We used to ask for gas certificates, electrical safety, all those things we used to ask for as the application process. We're not asking for that now. Trying to make that really, really clear. We will look at that at compliance. So we're not expecting landlords to have necessarily a perfect property, but your license conditions do require quite a lot of things to be in place. And so once license get issued, we'll be undertaking compliance checks, and some of that will include your paperwork. Including not just the statutory requirements around gas safety, electrical safety, but also conditions on the licence regarding, for example, a waste management plan. an ASB plan, those sorts of things that we expect you to have training, records of your inspections that you've undertaken at the properties, that sort of thing. We'll be undertaking compliance checks, and that will be where the focus will be, and that's why the application form is reduced for Selective.
Julie, sorry, yeah.
Yeah, that won't be 100% the same for the HMO application form, so that there is legal questions that we have to ask in there.
Yeah.
But once you start the form, there is a list of documents that you need to have available. So if you just make sure you've got those available and then carry on with the form.
That was one of the questions, yeah.
Yeah, because the HMO form is larger, we have enabled the save function because we thought it would be difficult for people completing the HMO form, which will take longer, not to have that save function. However, like David said, it can cause us some operational difficulties, but we've put a patch in behind where we can retrieve those if they save them and then go back to a different link. So we have got a mechanism in place for that, but it does take a bit more management to have that save option.
Okay, that's good. This landlord are planning to move their properties to a company next year. Do they have to reapply as a company and pay again? So they own them in, say, Linda Cobb, and they're moving them over for maybe tax purposes to Cobb Estates. But the same people are all involved. Would they need to just do a variation on the license, perhaps?
It will depend who the license holder is the question. We can't. The law doesn't allow us to transfer license holders to a different license holder. So we have to deal with that legal requirement to make sure that the license holder is one person.
As long as Linda Cobb stayed as a license holder.
The owner of the property doesn't have to be the license holder. So in that sense, it can be that named individual. So even if the properties are put under a company, for whatever reason, you can still have that named person who, for example, may be a director of the company as the license holder. You don't need to change the information necessarily, as long as they still have the control and they're the most appropriate person to be the license holder. Then that's no reason why you have to change it.
Will you need this landlord to tell you that the ownership has changed? Is that part of the licensing conditions? Do you know? Yes, it is for. I know it probably is for HMO.
If it were,
yeah. We would need to be aware of it, because if there's any additional people coming into the management or control of the property, we might want to do fit and proper checks on those new people. In HMO world, we have had a company that changed the company name, and we had to seek some legal guidance on that, and they did have to make new applications in that case. So if it's a company to company, it's a bit more difficult. But as David said, if it's a named license holder, we'd have to look at it. But yeah, it's possibly feasible.
Okay. Lots of questions about, so for example, like you were saying, David, if you applied, you don't need to reapply to the new scheme until your existing license has expired, and it's not a reapplication, it's a new application. So I think that's the terminology that you're using, isn't it? It's a new scheme, new application. So once your current one's ended, then you apply to the new scheme if you're in the boundary.
Yeah. So if you're outside the boundary, you don't need to do anything. Your license will just expire when it does. But if you are in the new boundary, you don't need to apply until your license expires. So do check the emails with the information about your license, which will be, some people will be 5 years old now, but do check the dates, because it might vary depending on when you applied. You might have multiple properties, and some of them may expire at different times. So you just need to make sure that you diarise those in, because you are responsible. We may remind you, but you are responsible for reapplying. That's not for us to.
That was my next question.
Oh, right.
Our reminders sent out. So sporadically, but you are saying, sorry, Juliet.
We do send reminders out to the correspondence and email address that you provided 5 years ago, or with your application, unless you've updated it with us and we've got the new details. So if you move house, you change your email address, anything like that, that is the correspondence address we will send it to the one that we have on the record. Yeah, so just be aware of that.
Yeah, and also
because you may
spam and
not get
things
them
like
right.
that. Yeah.
I think we're in the process of writing to every license holder that's applied in the first scheme, and manager as well. And we've done a lot of this already through our landlord newsletter, which goes out to about 6,000 landlords and agents. So we are in the process of writing to everybody, as a catch-all as well. But all the information on the website is there, and we've done our best to try and make sure that we write to people. But so if you haven't received an update yet, it will come in next few weeks. There's a lot to write to, so it won't go out all at once.
David, your slide stated you need evidence of proof of address. Is this proof of rented address or proof of the landlord's residence?
Proof of the landlord's residence address. Yeah. So it's really checking that the property, that the proposed license holder's address that put on the application form is their address. So it's just, we used to ask for photographic ID. It doesn't have to be photographic ID. It's just proof of address. So we've reined that in again. That's another requirement we've reduced, if that's the right word. We've made it easier. So
do it later on. Yeah. There was a really long delay between the application and issuing of the license last time. What is the expected time frame of issuing the licenses this time? Are you on it?
Quicker than last time. We had a whole new 70 new members of staff. We were training everybody. We were trying to get we had a very complex application process. That's again another reason why we've got rid of some of the requirements, because actually, for example, some of the questions we used to ask on the form, we now don't need to ask those questions because we can get that information from elsewhere. So EPC certificates and your rating for the property, there's now a national register that we can access, but it now allows us to use the information from that national register. We don't need to ask you. So we will be issuing licenses a lot quicker than last time. Can't give you any particular timescales, but I'll be very surprised if we don't start issuing licenses this year. So before the end of December, I'm anticipating we'll be able to issue draft licenses. So that will be within the month. We've got a set of trained colleagues that will be able to issue a lot quicker than last time.
And just doubling check that landlords for Selective, they can apply now if their license is running out shortly. And is it like the MOT system where you don't lose time if you apply sooner? So if my license runs out,
we won't be looking at the applications forms until the scheme starts. So the scheme doesn't start till the 1st of December. So if you apply now, you won't necessarily hear from us immediately. You get your receipt, and you'll get your confirmation of your application. And that's another change, actually. Some of the feedback from last year is the receipt, when you pay, has been updated, reviewed, refreshed. So you get a bit more information on your receipt as well, giving, in terms of details of the property that you're applying for and things that you've inputted onto the application form. You won't get your draft license immediately, but we'll be issuing from when the scheme starts, all being well.
Housing charities providing a free or low-cost housing, do they still have to apply for and pay for a licence? You can't exempt anybody, is that right? Yeah,
there aren't any free licences, unfortunately. There is a requirement for us to licence all properties within the designated area, and unfortunately we don't operate any free licence applications.
Is the proposed licence holder declaration form completed online by the landlord? Download?
It's completed by the applicant, so the applicant needs to send it to the proposed licence holder. It can be done online. I think there may be a PDF version, but I think you can see it. It's on our website, and you can see it when you first log into the application form. It's there. It's one of the things that you can do before you start the application process, so you can get it downloaded, filled in, and then you upload it.
If I'm doing it for my mum, I'd download it, I'd take it to my mum, I'd get her to sign it, and then I'd upload it, or I'd take the computer and she'd do it then. If I'm doing it for her. Cool. Okay, thank you. Right, let's go through some of the ones that we had sent in previously. I did my DASH training, the foundation one, 3 years ago. When I apply for a new licence in December, do I have to do the same course again, or will that one still stand? or will you just accept the Dash advanced course?
So in terms of the license condition, and the conditions are subject to review. We are, because we've had some tribunal decisions recently, we are in the process of just reviewing the conditions. So do check your license when you receive it, because there may be some changes that we make prior to going live, and particularly with HMO licenses, there may be some specific conditions around your property that you don't have for selective licenses. But so I will say what the condition is currently, but it is subject to change, and that's a big important thing that people need to take away. So the license condition requires that license holders have training within the previous 3 years. If they haven't had training within the previous 3 years of when we grant the license, when we grant the license, they need to undertake training within 12 months. And there are a list of 4 or 5 different providers within the license documentation that you receive. And I've done a few of these different sessions. We've worked with East Midlands property owners as well, EMPO recently, and license holders clearly not been reading the conditions because they've been asking about this condition, about training, and who the providers are. Well, it's all within the documentation. It's all there. Yes, it's quite lengthy, but it is a legal document. We've made no bones about it being lengthy. We've added to it over the years from feedback from you as license holders to provide more information, more clarity. So that's why it does run to several pages, but do make sure that you familiarise yourself with. They are subject to change, but the conditions that apply will be the ones that you receive. They have been changed 3 or 4 times probably over the last few years. So it's really important that you do check what your actual licence is that you receive.
But the bit in the policy doesn't actually state a course, does it? It just says training with. So
there are 5 different options. I think NRLA,
yes,
Safe Agent, EMPO, Unipol, Dash. They're all listed there. So we don't say you have to do this one or that one. Some are provided as part of your membership for free. So as part of your membership,
you've approved all of our training, and they all satisfy your condition.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, that's good. Are you still accepting joint license holders, i.e. me and my agent can be joint license holders?
Bit of bone of contention, this one. We would never encourage joint license holders as a manager and a proposed license holder as an owner as well. So the legislation talks about the most appropriate person being the license holder. So we would never advocate multiple license holders at the property. There are some exceptions to that with partnerships, for example. That's recognised in law as being multiple, joint partners. That's and in law, a partnership is usually 2 or more people. But with something we are going to take away and get a further legal opinion on from colleagues within our legal team. The problem comes where, for example, we enforce legislation against the proposed license holder or the license holders. If there are more than one, finger pointing from the license holder to the manager, of the owner to the manager. Sorry, if they're both license holders, it might mean that people fall foul when they think somebody else is doing it. But we are going to get some more legal advice on it. But the legislation does talk about one license holder in terms of the most appropriate person. So we think it gets more complicated, more burdensome for you as individuals as well. It will take longer to comply with conditions, and things might fall between the cracks. The other bit that Julie made me, but I'll say it now before she maybe does. The legislation talks about when the license holder dies. It doesn't say license holders. Thanks, Julie, got it. It's almost like we've talked about this before, where it talks about the license holder. When the license holder dies, the license ceases to exist. It doesn't. For 3 months, there's a temporary exemption really for the next person to have to reapply for a license, whoever that may be, in terms of the estate of the property. So we are going to take it away because it's something that we get asked a lot, and we've been asked it in the last few weeks as well with the scheme coming up. So I'm going to take that away and seek some further clarity on it. But we would always seek one person as being the license holder. That would be that's the most ideal situation, we think, for all parties, and then allows the the manager to be the manager, and then that if a license holder is not happy with their manager, the relationship doesn't work, or they want to move to manager, then they can vary their license rather than having to put another manager onto the license, which would be a new application. So if they do move between managing agents, they would only have to vary their license, which is free. But if they do want to change their manager and they're the license holder, then that is new application. So there's a significant cost to the owner if they want to change their managing agent if they are a proposed license holder.
Thank you. Two questions that span previous questions that were asked before and in the chat. Do I have to give the tenants a copy of my licence, and does the tenant count as an interesting party that needs informing, on the application?
So the tenant doesn't need to be informed that you're applying for a licence. The person having control, an interested party is usually someone that's got a legal interest, as in ownership, a mortgage company, a leaseholder, freeholder, other owners.
You want the tenants' details.
So the tenants don't need to be listed as an interested party, but they do need to receive a copy of the licence. That's one of the conditions on the licence. So again, you should be reading your condition on the licence. That's not a new condition. That's been on Selective and probably from Additional. I don't know if it's been on your scheme, Julie, for a while now. It's one of the documents that licence holders have to give to their tenants, is a copy of the licence and the conditions.
Okay. For properties which are already in financial difficulty due to mortgage rates, etc., can you sell and keep the current tenants in place with the existing licence, or must you evict the tenants if you're forced to sell due to the licence fee being the final straw that broke the camel's back? Is there any sort of Julie?
The licence is non-transferable, so it's the same if you sell your property for any reason. The licence wouldn't transfer with the property, so the answer to that is no, the licence isn't transferable.
If you're selling with a tenant, you'd need to sell to another landlord who would then...
Yeah, the new landlord would put in their application and get their licence for themselves, because it's not transferable from person to person.
And in terms of financials, you're not offering any monthly payments or anything like that?
No, the Part A fee is less than it was in the first scheme, because that administrative process is the bit that takes less time now. We've reduced, the Part A fee has reduced. Part B fee is slightly more, but overall the fee is very similar to what it was when we last reviewed the fees in 2019. So
okay, is it correct that short stays, less than 30 days, I suppose that's like Airbnb and things like that, are not covered by this scheme, and therefore offering properties on this basis will be a way to escape the fee for any properties which are in distress?
They're not covered by licensing. Short-term lets are exempt from licensing, and we have but Julie might have something to say, but be very aware that it may affect other considerations. For example, how you deal with waste at the property. If it's not a domestic property anymore, you may have to look at commercial waste arrangements for the property. It may not be council tax anymore. It may be business rates that you have to pay. There are other implications, likewise maybe planning implications as well, that you need to consider if you don't want to let it as a normal house, shall we say. And you'll have to get your own independent legal advice on those sorts of considerations, because there are things that are outside our remit that, it might be an easy solution, might be actually it might be something a bit more complex. But I don't know if Julie wants to add to that.
Yeah, there is a bit in the legislation where it's about the is it their own main and residence, basically. So have they got anywhere else that they live and they're just there on a temporary basis, or is it their permanent address? So yeah, like David said, if you're thinking about an arrangement like that, just check it out legally that you are covered. In the HMO world, we do have some examples of hotels where we have issued licenses because they have people that are placed there from not just this authority, but other local authorities, but that is their only permanent residence. So we can, you know, we can license part or all of the building in the HMO world. So yeah, it's worth checking it out if you're thinking about those models.
Yeah, just sorry, Linda, just to add to that, other considerations might be insurance considerations, and whether or not there's any restrictions on the use of the property for other purposes. So again, you'd have to look at your own deeds and that sort of thing for the property, because every property will have different restrictions in place.
You know, one of the conditions is doing the regular inspections, you know, 3 months, 6 months, for both of you really. Can you, one of the landlords was asking, can you outsource them? So you're not using an agent. So for example, I say my mum can go every 3 months to do it on my behalf. I give her the checklist and she goes round. Would you accept that if it's all documented?
Yes, we would. There are some provisos in terms of, is the person doing those checks a competent person?
Yes.
Do they know what they're looking at? Within the license condition, it asks for details of when the inspection was, who did the inspection, and what they found at the property, and what action was taken to remedy any faults or any disrepair, anything that was broken that needed fixing. So those are the documents that you have to maintain for the duration of the license. So if we come asking and you can't identify who inspected the property, you can't identify when they inspected, well, actually that would be a breach of your license. So there's no reason why it can't be somebody else, but you know, ultimately the license holder is the person that is responsible for those checks and making sure that they happen. So yes, they can be outsourced, and a managing agent may be somebody that would do those for you. You know, there are some, you know, invoicing company, not invoicing companies,
Inventories.
Yeah.
Inventory, you know, companies that do specialize, for example, in doing inventories. So even managing agents might outsource, you know, some of the inventories that is done, because there are specialists out there that just do that, and are very competitive. So yeah, there may be, well, you know, other ways and means of complying, but ultimately the license holder is the one that has to evidence that. Okay.
The block license application, you mentioned that was paper. Has that been updated at all? Because apparently that was quite horrendous.
Yeah, we haven't updated it yet. We're trying to focus on the individual forms first and getting those ready. So we haven't had time to change them. It's something we were trying to do before the end of November. It's something we're working hard on, but we haven't updated it yet. So the current form can be used. It is paper, and there are more questions, but there are bigger risks with some of the larger properties, which is why it's more burdensome. And also, usually there's a freeholder and leaseholder, and lots and lots of interested parties. In some cases, there may be lots of interested parties. So that's a bit of a schedule almost at the end for interested parties that we ask people to fill in. But we are going to work hard. But in terms of numbers of applications, I think about 110 block licenses that we received in the first scheme. But I'm aware it's not a great form for people to fill in.
Okay, this is quite an interesting one. So just bear with me, because I think this will be quite useful. The online application process for the selective license only allows it to be renewal if the current license has not expired. So if you're getting your house in order before it's expired. The previous selective license expired on the 31st of July, which was before you opened the application process for renewals. The 31st of July date was not the full 5 years from the date that I applied for the original license, which was November 2018. How can I renew my selective license as a renewal? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense.
Good.
The form is essentially the same. A renewal it's not really in law, but it allows somebody to apply before their license expires. That's all a renewal is. Right. It's somebody applying before their current license expires. Yeah. So if your license is expired, it's not a renewal application. But actually, the form is the same. We'd ask the same information. It's just the government talks about renewals in some of the guidance, that it has issued around licensing. So it's a bit misleading, perhaps, that it's a renewal. It doesn't matter. It's a new application for a new scheme. So apologies if that's misleading. It doesn't mean you can bypass all the questions and just sign on the dotted line. Unfortunately, it's essentially still the same process and the same application.
I know you're not, and I know the landlords aren't uploading certificates anymore, but in terms of the EPC, if your EPC has expired but you've got current tenants that have been with you for years and years, do you need to have a new EPC as part of your license?
No, it's not a requirement.
No. So if one legally is needed, then you need one, but one if legally isn't needed, then you don't. Yes,
that's right. Yeah.
So that's that one. That's just about DBS, and you're not asking for DBS. I'm a license holder for 250 apartments. We don't own 100% of the building, so block license doesn't apply to us. There is no insurance protection for license holders, no discount provision to license with multiple assets. Council is penalising legitimate council do not inspect 70 apartments under. Oh, it's not a question. Okay, just have a look for the next question. One question of training of landlords. We undergo regular training and varied training when available and relevant, but it seems pointless to redo the same courses again just to stamp in the last 3 years. So we have experience actual life training as landlords. What do you think? So I guess that's, you don't want landlords to just do training for the sake of it. You want them to do meaningful training, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, bringing everybody up to a minimum standard is really what we're aiming for through licensing. There's no requirement outside of licensing for landlords to be trained. So anything is better than nothing. 5 years is a long time. If you lasted training 5 years ago, I'd recommend you do some retraining, perhaps a different course if you want to try a different course that might have been updated, that might be different to the first course that you did. What we would expect is if you've got a more complex building, and again, there's no requirement on this, but if you've got a more complex building, more complex arrangements, perhaps a block license, there may be, not currently, but there may be in the future, requirements from the building safety regulator around additional training for more complex buildings that are tall buildings or significantly larger buildings compared to a normal family house. But I would, if you can, but if there's no requirement and you do, if you want to find evidence of what training, we can consider that. If you don't think you need to undertake the same training course that you did 3 or 5 years ago, but we'd expect some evidence of what that training was and why it was relevant.
Okay. I have reapplied for licenses that have expired, but although I was the applicant and the proposed license holder, I needed to complete the proposed license holder declaration. The website didn't give me the option to skip this stage. Why is this?
I don't know. It's the short version.
Can you take that one away and just check and just make sure that that wasn't a glitch at the beginning and that's obviously been sorted now?
Yeah, I can take that away. I'll make a note of that. Thanks.
Yeah, cool. Thank you.
It is a new form, so there are a few things that we're still finding out about the form that doesn't work the way we thought it would do. So it's things like that that we are trying to address as we go along.
Yeah. How are we doing for time, Matt? Are we okay?
Yeah, 1/4 hour left.
Okay, lovely. Have you got anything that you need to add, Matt? Have you got anything sort of from the accreditation side in terms of fees? I know we're seeing a few more landlords come through to Dash now, either from a renewal basis or from sort of they're in this new area. Are you finding the same?
Yeah, I think as David and Julie have sort of highlighted, the reduced license fee is really significant. It's a really good reduction. It's a good offer. So it works out as about £350 per HMO license, mandatory and additional, which is really good. I think it's about 220 on the selective. So yeah, so I think it's a really good offer on top of that. I know a few people have been asking about the training. And if you're a member of Unipol or Dash, we both offer free training, so that's a further saving if you're accredited. So yeah, so I think, as you say, that they're the sort of the big things. But on top of that, we obviously provide quite a lot of updates on the sector, and on things like licensing. So we'll kind of try and keep our members as up to date as possible with regulations and any changes to these conditions and licensing. And we're going to work towards getting some templates as well to comply with some of these license conditions, which will hopefully be really helpful as well for our members.
Yeah, I think that'll be really good, especially to give the landlords a start of a 10, somewhere to sort of start and have a look. And maybe quite a few of the questions in the Q&A box we're saying, you know, is there somewhere I can go to get a checklist, or is there somewhere I can go to get, you know, one set of information? So we can definitely work on that.
Yeah, there's some good guidance out there for the antisocial behaviour and waste already. But I think we're going to have a look and see, as you say, if we can do some templates on things like how to comply with the regular inspections of the property and that sort of thing. So we'll get something together, and obviously we'll be circulating that to our members, and I'm sure Julian and David will as well.
Yeah, I think also one of the questions, David, was one of the landlords was expecting us to be going through an application. Maybe we can do a video between me and Matt and you guys on an application, and we can make that live as well. I know I did one with you back in the day, a live one, which I thought was very brave of you in a room full of landlords. So maybe we could find one with some good graphics on, and we could do that.
Yes, we could. Yeah, we could. Yeah, it should be. That should be hopefully quicker and easier now than the form is shorter. But it is relatively straightforward. There are icons to, you know, if you want to ask or clarify a question, there's usually a little eye with, you know, click on for more information if you're unsure what the question is about. There's things like that as well.
What I think was one of the trickiest bits. Actually, you know, like when you go onto the website and then they make you do like create an account. It was like, oh right, I've just sat down to do my life, and now I've got to create an account for that, and that was just a little bit. It's just frustrating, isn't it? Because you want to go straight in with it, and then it's like, right, okay, verify my email, put a password in. So yeah, that's just frustrating. Just back to some questions. Julie, you mentioned when we were talking, I think it was you were talking about the compliance fee, the less compliant fee, and it said a history of enforcement. How far back is the enforcement going, or is that going to be on a case-by-case basis?
It's on a case-by-case basis, but we look at our history that we've got. We do have data retention policy, so licenses are usually held on the system for about 12 years, so that's the data that we do hold. So we'll if you've had a license before, we'll look at the history of the past license. We probably wouldn't go any further back than that, to be fair, because we'll base it on the performance of the last license, because I mean somebody could have been prosecuted in 2009, but you know they've learned from that.
Rehabilitation of offenders and all of that act, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So we'll, you know, we wouldn't take that into consideration, and we do consider that piece of legislation about spent convictions and stuff like that as well. So it's, yeah, we look at basically the history of the property that we've got on our database. You know, have you had an improvement notice, a civil penalty notice, stuff like that.
You also, Julie, mentioned a percentage of dip testing for Matt and I's landlords.
Yep.
Is that it's going to, I know sort of in the first selective we said so 30% of properties or 20%, I can't remember what they were. Are we doing something similar again?
It will be something similar to that. Yeah. We've got an officer that's doing some HMOs at the moment that are accredited, and it's just a random sample that we pull off and work our way through. It's just to assure ourselves that, you know, that everything that we think is happening in the accredited properties is actually in place and working. But we, you know, even in accredited properties, we're still coming across some things where they need a little bit of an improvement, as I'm sure you do with your inspectors as well, Linda and Matt.
Yeah,
yeah, so that's what we're doing.
Based on that, I think that the top tip that I can give anybody is go and have a look at your properties. Make sure that you're really going around your properties at regular inspections, because when we go, we can definitely see the difference between a landlord that was in the last 3 months and a landlord that hasn't been in for 6 months. So there's things there. So that, yeah, I just think
just on that, Linda, I think what landlords say, oh, it's got to go every 6 months, that's a bit burdensome, but usually this is one of the biggest assets that people own, perhaps their own house, if they've got their own house, and also for insurance purposes, all that sort of thing. It's often a requirement that properties like this are regularly inspected, and what a better way to do that than go around and record it and keep a record of that, who inspected, when they inspected, what they found. So if you do get a tenant complaining, or if tenant complains to us and says, my landlord's not done this, my landlord's not done that, and we go, actually, the landlord's documents that we've asked for as part of licenses say they visited 3 weeks ago, and this was never raised on the and then that puts the landlord in a stronger position. If they have been to inspect, they checked things out, the tenant didn't raise any concerns, they could see that the heating was working, the roof wasn't leaking, those sorts of things, puts it in a really good light for us dealing with landlords, to show that they know their property, they know what's happening at their property, and it gives them assurance that actually things are going well at the property, things are repaired, things are in place and working properly as well.
I think this is really interesting as well, just to say, my tenant has stopped paying rent and I'm in the process of eviction. Do I still need a licence? Yes, you do. I think that's quite a good point, because I think certain landlords would be, well, I know probably back in the day I would have been that, well, I'm not going to be a landlord for very much longer, so I don't think I need to apply for a licence. Does yours go on if are a landlord now, then you need one?
Well, I haven't actually mentioned temporary exemption notices. When the first scheme was introduced, we had a lot of landlords that, for whatever reason, may have had enough and wanted out of the market, and we dealt with a lot of requests for what's called a temporary exemption notice, and that's in law. If you're actively taking your property out of the private rented market, you can apply for an exemption from the council. So you do not have to apply for a licence, but you have to apply for a temporary exemption. And that, in effect, is a short application form that, what the property address is, who you are, and what steps you're taking to remove that property from the private rented sector. So if you're actively marketing the property, you've got solicitors in place to deal with the sale of a property, and you can evidence that would show to us that you are taking steps to exempt your property. The temporary exemption lasts for 3 months from the date that we grant it, and it can be extended once for a further 3 months at the applicant's request. And again, we have discretion as to whether or not we extend that 3 months to 6 months. But that really is for people that are, like some people have said, they're actively taking the property out of the market, and then perhaps they are in the process of evicting the tenants. But that process may take longer than 3 months. It may take longer than 6 months. But so if it goes beyond that 6 months, then you would have to apply for a licence.
But that lady that I was just talking about, she needs to get in touch regarding a temporary exemption, really.
Yeah. And I think there's an application form on our website to be able to apply. So you can, I think the links were on.
We can have a look at that, Matt, can't we? We can.
Yeah.
I think in that situation as well, it's worth considering that have they not applied because they're evicting the tenant because of rent arrears? Are they then going to use the property as a rented property going forward? Because that won't be an intention to take it out of the rental market. So just be careful with that. Just because you're evicting somebody wouldn't be a reason we would give you a temporary exemption. It would actively have to be that you're looking to take it out of the marketplace.
We own 50% of a building, 76 apartments out of 152. We also have control of the RTM company managing the block. Can we have a block license?
I think it has to be the entire block that's covered. If there is more than one owner or more than one manager, within the block, it would be individual licenses for the block. But do have a look at the link on the website and the policy within the presentation. But usually it has to be the whole block that's under common ownership or management. I think that's the criteria. I've not read the detail for a while, but yeah, we would always prefer individual licenses, but because also if you do apply for a block license, and I don't know, say you own 10 flats, but one of the flats gets sold on a lease for whatever reason, that whole block license would have to be reapplied for if the ownership changes within that block. So blocks are not for everybody. They are quite specific in the criteria that needs to be met. They are more appropriate for larger, specific, usually purpose-built dwellings, or if you own, a block of say 6 flats in a building, that might be more appropriate for you to apply for a block. Sometimes landlords have applied for blocks, even though it's not been financially beneficial for them, but they just want one license. They want one set of paperwork as well. What I didn't say about block licenses, apologies, is that there are additional conditions that go with the block license. So that's often around extra fire safety measures, for example, or if there's a lift in the building, or if there's CCTV in the building, extra requirements about how you manage that building, recognizing that larger buildings with multiple residents or multiple flats within a block do carry additional risks. So there are extra criteria and conditions that we put on block licenses as well.
Okay. How are we doing for time, Matt? Have we got a little bit longer? Right.
A couple of minutes. Couple more.
Let's just that's a good idea from Victoria. In our previous sessions, obviously we get loads of questions in the Q&A box, and I've sort of picked a sample out to hopefully cover quite a bit. But would we be able to provide the landlords with some answers, in the column of questions, and then some answers next to that? If Matt and I circulate those for council, we can populate what we can, but obviously you guys can put in some information there, maybe some links as well. Would that be acceptable?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah,
that's good. And then that can sit with this webinar video as well, can't it? Oh, that's cool. Shall we go for one more? Let's have a look. What happens if we find out a landlord doesn't have an in-date satisfactory ICR in place on the date of submitting the application? So can you...
Again,
they're not asking for certificates, are you? No, you're right.
No.
Yeah.
So the requirement as part of the application process that the law requires is there's a declaration about the safety of gas and electric in the building. So when you fill in the application form, you have to be satisfied that the property is safe in terms of gas and gas and electric. That's what the law requires. We used to do that as part of prior certificate, so that's not required anymore. But what we'd say is make sure that you are satisfied it's safe. But again, different for HMOs. Julie, do you want to come?
Julie, yeah.
Yeah, if it's a HMO application that comes in, obviously we check the certificates, and if we find it's out of date, we will contact you and ask you for a new certificate.
Thanks. Now, I know Leicester City Council were doing drop-ins for landlords that are not computer able or maybe struggling with the application process. Are Nottingham City Council doing anything, or are we sort of using MPO and NRLA, etc.? Because I know they are offering some services, aren't they?
Yeah, we haven't put in any sessions specific for landlords, but there are a number of sessions like this, like the MPO ones and the NRLA, and I think other managing agents are running them for their landlords as well. But we haven't. We did offer them in the first scheme, but with the first scheme, we think people have had this opportunity. The scheme is the application form is simpler now. We think really landlords should be able to either do it themselves or get additional support from elsewhere to comply.
Really?
If anybody does want to come and sit with the council to fill the form in, we can offer that facility, but it's via an appointment, and that we do charge a fee for that as well, because obviously it's extra time on top of the application. that that they're wanting. So we can assist, but there is a charge. Yeah.
And I think some of the agents are doing that, like you say, David, that are offering that service as well. So it is worth checking with your agent to see if that's something they can offer. Well, thank you so much. My chairing ability has landed us bang on 12:30, which is a miracle. So thank you so much. Thank you for Unipol for sorting out the logistics of this and sending all of the invites out, etc. I'm overwhelmed by the support that we received. 250 landlords have booked on, and all of the questions. So we will get back to you with them, like we've discussed, and we will be doing another session in the future. So watch this space, and thank you again. Thank you.
Okay,
Thanks,
bye.
everyone.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
bye-bye.
And